It's springtime in Texas, which means the trees are budding out, the flowers are starting to bloom, and you probably have your tax appraisal notice in the mail. You may have some sticker shock. So today we're bringing you an expert on how to protest your property taxes. So stay tuned.
Today we're here with Marc Moffitt, who's a property tax protest expert. So Marc, tell us a little bit about your qualifications and your expertise in this, so that way people can see the value on what they're getting by watching this video.
No, really glad to be here today. Thank you so much for the invitation. Known you guys for a long time, love what you guys do. I spent 20 years at one of the local appraisal districts there. I worked my way all the way from a line level staff appraiser all the way up to senior analyst. Solved a lot of problems for a lot of appraisal districts across the state, worked with a lot of appraisal districts across the state. So a lot of experience in a lot of different parts of appraisal district operations over the years. And I'm also a broker, just like yourself there. So I'm a real estate broker, and I primarily deal with the commercial side of things and litigation, things like that. I'm also a professor up at the University of North Texas. I teach a real estate valuations course up there, along with law of agency principles, and a couple other things there. So I've got a pretty well-rounded experience there.
Let's go ahead and let's just dive into this. Tell us about the 2022 market as far as real estate, because I know people are starting to probably get their tax bills in the mail and they're wondering what's going on.
Sure, absolutely. So 2022 is definitely a year of change, and so a lot of crazy things are going on in the market there. Okay, so you start off in the first part of the year. Okay, everything is hot. Okay, and then all of a sudden the Fed, along with your political environment there, inflation all of a sudden becomes a real problem, right, for the economy. And so we've got to get inflation under control. As a result, the Fed steps in and they start doing major rate hikes. I mean, they're jacking them up left and right. When we take a look historically at January 1st of 22 to January 1st of 23, what we see is kind of an upward slope there, okay? And so from median sales price as of January 22 was lower, and then what happened was it increased over the summertime, and then once those rate increases started taking effect, you start seeing a little bit of a plateauing effect throughout the last half or quarter of the year, if you will. I think that one of the frustrating things I think a lot of people are going to see is that, hey, the market's going down, why did my appraisal go up? And that is going to be the explanation there is that it's a change from January 1st of 22 to January 1st of 23. So I think that's really critical to understand there on that. So very important.
So Marc, when should people protest their taxes?
Yeah.
How much time do they have once they get their notice in the mail? What happens next?
Sometime in April, most of the appraisal districts are going to be sending out those notices of appraised value, okay? And you're going to get a letter in the mail. It's going to come from the appraisal district of the county that you're in. And it's going to say, hey, here's the new proposed value for 2023, okay? And you will have 30 days to file a protest on that. Now, you don't have to necessarily go down there. You don't necessarily have to have all your stuff together. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have all of your evidence and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to do any of that. All you have to do within the 30-day window is say, I disagree, and either turn in the form, file online, go down there, etc., turn something in. That's all you have to do. You don't have to have any information, any documentation, nothing. You just have to say, I disagree.
So Marc, what are the different ways to protest the property taxes?
A couple of different ways. The easiest way I recommend to most people is just file online. Okay, in that appraisal notice, okay, it's going to have a website address for you to go to file that protest, and it's also most likely going to contain a little PIN number on it there, okay? And make sure you keep that PIN. Don't throw it away, okay? Because then you're going to have to call up and say, what's my PIN? Okay, so make sure you keep that little PIN number there, and if you will, go ahead and file online. That is the easiest, fastest, most efficient way to do things. And then that way, that gives you the ability to correspond with the appraisal district electronically there instead of mail or having to go down there. It certainly gives you that electronic option, certainly a lot more efficient that way. That's my recommendation. The others, you can mail it in. You can send it by regular mail, you can send it by certified mail, either one of those. And you can also go down in person to turn in a protest form if you want to. So any one of those methods, online, mail, in person, any one of those options are always available.
Okay, so speak a little bit to when you go in. So you can go in and protest, but there's also the review board. Talk a little bit about the differences between just going in and then going in front of the review board.
Sure. So there's two components to the appeal process. There is what's called the informal appeal process, and then there is what's called the formal appeal process. Okay, so the informal appeal process, you're just sitting down with a member of the staff, an appraiser, and you're just having a casual conversation about what the value should be. Okay, so you're bringing information that you believe supports your opinion of value. They have their evidence, and then they'll try to work something out with you there. So that's the informal appeal process. That can also occur online through email exchange and or going back and forth through the portal. Okay, so most appraisal districts have portals where they'll have secure messaging back and forth. They'll have everything there in one place, and so you can go back and forth and try to negotiate that way. Generally speaking, the back and forth is usually limited online to maybe once or twice back and forth, okay? So kind of like in our offer, counter offer situations in real estate, right? So you make an offer, there's a counter offer, things like that. So in this situation, there's probably an offer, there's a counter offer, there's one more offer, and that's usually gonna be about it. And so if there's something really, really unique, okay, that is going on with your property is exceptionally unique, okay? And I'm not talking about, I'm the only yellow house on the block, right? Okay, so something you really, really special or unique about your property, some condition issues, things like that, the online appeal may not be the best option for you there. You may want to go ahead and go in person. That way you can take all your pictures and evidence, etc., take that in there. And so that's what I would recommend on that. Now, the next one is going to be the formal appeal process, and this is the one that makes most people nervous there. So what's going to happen is you're going to have a panel of citizens throughout the county in which you're in, okay? So don't worry, they're not experts, they're not, realtors necessarily, they don't work for the appraisal district. They are very clear about the fact that they are fully independent of the appraisal district. They're just jury members. That's all they are. They're just a panel of jurors, and they're there to listen to what the appraisal district has to say. They're there to listen to what the property owner has to say. And what they will do is they'll take that information and then they'll make a decision right in front of you. And so that is called the appraisal review board, and that is the formal appeal process. So if things don't work out for you at the informal process, if you're not able to reach an agreement with the appraisal district staff just by meeting with them and talking with them informally, that's okay. You can always move on to the formal appeal process, which is the ARB there, and then they'll make a determination on the deal.
So Marc, based upon your experience, do people coming in to protest the taxes, do they have better experience with staff or with the ARB board?
Yeah, so I'd say probably, overall, you've got probably an 80-90% chance of success, okay? So you're probably going to be able to get something, okay? And so generally speaking, there's some room to make some movement, okay? Now, not in all cases, but in a lot, and so I would suggest really focusing on the informal process, okay? So one of the things when I was at the appraisal district that I realized very quickly is that not only does the appraisal district roll the dice when they go into those ARB hearings, but also the property owners roll the dice, okay? So it is possible that the appraisal district may make an offer to you that is less than what you end up getting at the ARB. And so I've seen that happen multiple times there, and that's a very frustrating situation for everybody involved there. It's like, well, hey, I got this offer over here, why didn't you guys come in higher? So you certainly don't want to be in that situation, but however, if you feel really strongly about your situation there and your case and the facts that support your, the evidence that supports your value, then by all means, go ahead and move on to the appraisal review board.
Okay, so interesting, you just said sometimes when they go to the ARB, they may get a worse deal than they would have gotten with if they had just gone with the informal. Can they go back and say, okay, I don't like what you've told me, ARB, can I go back and have this other offer that I got in the informal hearing?
So unfortunately, one of the things that they tell you in the beginning of the hearing is that all offers are off the table. Okay, so this is what it's going to be now, and so they'll proceed forward with that hearing there at that point. So yeah.
Okay, Mark, so I've heard you mention several times evidence that you bring. Talk a little bit about what can people bring to prove that their home value has not gone up to what they're saying it is.
Sure. So I would say any evidence, any facts, okay, right? So one of the best things that you can do is to contact a local realtor, okay, and contact a local realtor and say, hey, appraisal district says my house went to this value here. Do you have any comps you can give me to help me kind of dispute that a little bit, okay? And so call a local real estate agent and have them produce some comps, okay? So they've got access to the MLS. They'll shoot them over to you there, and at that point, you've got some good information about what the market's doing, and you can take that in and say, hey, based on the sales of other properties in my neighborhood here that are like mine, okay, here's where I think the value needs to be, not at the number that the appraisal district said. And so that's great evidence right there. The other thing that you can take a look at is bringing in information about damage, okay, what we call deferred maintenance, okay? So if you're like me, you got kids that are hard on a house, okay? So my kids are hard on my house. If I took pictures of all the damage that these knuckleheads have done to my house over here, I'd get my value dropped pretty good, okay? So they have torn my house up, okay? So go ahead and take pictures of everything they've done to that house. It'll be pretty compelling evidence there. Now, along with that, not just the photos there, but we're also going to need to know, hey, how much is it going to cost to repair all of this stuff, okay? So yeah, I can see you've got 10 holes in your wall there, but how much is it going to cost to repair all those walls, repaint them, retexture, all that kind of stuff? So getting some bids, some quotes to redo that from a local handyman or something like that is always good evidence also to have there.
Mark, you mentioned as far as having your local real estate agent, pull the comps. Are there certain times of year that the tax district puts more weight on the comps, say from first year versus towards the end of the year?
Sure. So the appraisal district is going to be looking for anything that they can as close to January 1st as possible, okay? Anything that you can get in that last quarter of the year leading up to that January 1st, or even first quarter into the new year, is also something that can be taken a look at. Those are ideal scenarios there. Now, as we know, the market has shifted. Transaction volume has declined a little bit there, okay? So one of the challenges that you may run into is that during those times of the year, there may not be that many transactions available that represent what your house should be worth, right? So you may have to go back a couple of months. You may have to go back into the summertime. You may have to go back all the way to the beginning of January 1st of the prior year. And so one of the things that you do when you run into a situation you don't have enough data is you expand your search criteria, okay? So one of the first things you can do there is expand the date criteria. You can also expand the radius, your distance from your property there. So those are all things that you can do there. But you still want to keep the spirit of comparability there, okay? So you want to make sure that the information that you're pulling is truly comparable to your property.
So are there a certain number of homes that you'd like to bring in, comparable homes that they want to see? Is there 4 or 5? Is there kind of a number?
Yeah. So one of the things when I was at the appraisal district, one of the things I always found kind of interesting is I'd have somebody bring in a list of about 50, okay? And then I'd have to look through it. I'm like, okay, which one of these do you want to use? So let's narrow this down a little bit. Certainly large amounts of data are great in aggregate. However, really probably somewhere between 3 to 5 is usually sufficient.
So Mark, we talk about people going in and to protest their property taxes. How do they need to present their case in order to be able to make it favorable for them?
The big thing is to make sure you stay focused on facts. Okay, so that's the number one thing there. I would say take the information and say, look, I have these sales, I have these properties right here. I believe support a value of this number. Okay, and stick to that. Okay, so. One of the things I also recommend is stay calm, right? Always stay calm. Just in life in general. I've never found that I got a long way by pounding fists on the table and yelling and screaming and being difficult or contentious about things. I've always felt that when I showed a little bit of grace and humility about my position and where my facts stand, I always felt like I got a lot further down the process there on that. So I think same goes for the appraisal district dealing with that. And what I'd also suggest is when you go in there, and this kind of gets into the negotiation side of things there, have a number in mind, right? So you want to have a specific number in mind. I remember several years ago, back when I was younger, and I was probably in my 20s, and I had somebody come in, and the first thing out of their mouth was, "It went up." Yes, it did. Okay, so what number works for you, sir? I don't know, but it went up. Well, okay, did you have a number in mind? It's too high. Okay, so you can already kind of see here in the immediate back and forth here, we're not making any progress towards the goal of getting a number that works for somebody, right? So I always suggest, give the appraisal district something to work with, okay? That way they know where you're aiming for and where they need to try to be. A lot of times, if they can immediately see that they can get to your number, that conversation is over just like that. Okay, I'm good with your number. We're done. Let's sign off on it. Let's move on down the road. Now, the other side of the equation there, it may be a situation where you've got something that is, pretty far off of where they're able to get to, okay, either from a process or a procedural standpoint, but you may feel strongly about that. And if that number is pretty far off of what they think they can get to, they'll probably just say, I think it's probably best we just go ahead and send this one to the ARB, okay, and let them make a decision on that. And so, don't be offended by that. It's just part of the process. They have policies and procedures on how they operate, things like that. So, just go on to the ARB and present that case there. The ARB may or may not get to your number there, so that's an option.
So, Mark, my understanding is that there's two different types of property appraisals that you do as far as the equitable and market value. Tell us a little bit the difference between the two.
So they're a little bit different, and they're the same, but they're also very different in nature there. So a market value, okay, whenever you are appealing that the value exceeds market value, your complaint is essentially that I can't sell my house for the number you're saying that's on the deal here, okay? So you're saying that I have sales of other properties that are like mine that indicate that the value needs to be this number instead of this number that the appraisal district said, okay? That is what's referred to as a market value appeal, okay? The equitable appeal is based upon our constitutional right, okay? So everybody needs to be treated equitably, okay, and fairly and equitable. And so fair and equitable treatment means same method, same process. Doesn't always mean same value, but it does mean same process, same methodology. And so what you'll do then is you'll take properties that are very similar to yours within the neighborhood that you're in, and you'll make comparisons just like you would on a normal appraisal process of making adjustments for square footage, year built, all that kind of stuff. And what you'll do is you'll adjust those properties and come up with a value that you should be assessed at based on the other appraisals of other properties in the neighborhood to make sure that you're being fairly and equitably treated. So it's a little bit different mindset there. And so a lot of times I find that the equity appeals are generally speaking a little more successful than the market value appeals. In a lot of cases, you may be slightly under what theoretically the market is saying that you could probably sell your house for. However, once you go through and you look at the equity appeal, you might actually find that there's a justification for a reduction in value there, and the appraisal district can support that based on equity. And the law, and there is case law on this, that the equity appeal actually trumps market value in the appeals process. So even if you determine that the property owner could sell their property for more than what the appraisal district has on it, doesn't matter. That issue goes out the window. You are now focused on equitable treatment, fair and equitable treatment, and that value needs to be reduced down to a level that creates fairness and equity.
So how would someone go about figuring out the equity that their neighbors or comparable homes in their neighborhood, how would they go about proving that or showing that?
Most appraisal districts on their website have a pretty good amount of data. And so what you can do is, as part of your request for information, if you want to, you can actually request a download, an Excel download of the neighborhood and all the properties that are in there. And then what you can do is you can sort and filter and all that kind of stuff. Take a look at square footage. You can take a look at overall value, price per foot, all that kind of stuff. You can gather all of that and analyze it that way. A lot of times the appraisal districts have that information immediately available on the website. You can say, click here to download the neighborhood. A lot of appraisal districts have that right there. So really, really convenient to do that. And if they don't, just ask them. They're happy to provide it for you.
So Mark, what about exemptions? Homestead, over 65, disabled, veteran. Tell us about how that comes into play with all of this.
So exemptions, very, very important there. If you own and occupy your house, you're probably, well, yes you are, eligible for an exemption there, eligible for the homestead exemption. And so the homestead exemption is going to give you two benefits. It's going to give you a reduction in the taxable value of the property there. So think of it like whenever you do your IRS taxes there, okay? So you have what's called the standard deduction, right? So it lowers from your adjusted gross income down to your taxable income there. And so it does the same thing in the property tax world. So we go from market value down to what we call the assessed or the taxable value. And it just lowers tax liability there overall. Generally speaking, most homestead exemptions, if you take a look at it, between the tax rates and the amount of reduction there, they're generally worth anywhere between $300 to $800, something like that on average, depending on the entities and the tax rates that are involved, etc. Now the other benefit is what we call the homestead cap limit. And this is a really, really significant benefit here. Especially over the past couple of years, we've seen property values rise dramatically, okay? So 2021, 22, we started seeing, values were really, really shooting up a bunch. We were seeing double-digit increases in the market. Well, you apply that to somebody's property tax bill, and that's pretty rough, right? So, 20% increase in property tax liability, that's a big deal. So, in those situations, with a homestead exemption in place, the taxable value of what the property is taxed at is limited to 10% per year of increase over and above the previous year, okay? So that is a big, big benefit. Now, one of the other challenges, we talked about kind of the overall market change, okay, and how that's worked throughout 22 leading into 23. One of the things that may end up doing there, because of the rapid rate of change that we saw in 21 and 22 there, it is possible that you may see situations where property market values may actually decline. However, their taxable value may end up going up because it's a cumulative effect on the homestead exemption, okay? So it's 10% per year over the previous year's taxable value. Well, if 2 years ago the market value shot up 20% and then it went up another 15, well, there's 35% gap there, and it's only able to come up at 10% per year. Well, if all of a sudden the market value comes back down 10, well, you still got another 10 points plus to come up on a homestead exemption. Even though your market value may have declined, you're still coming up on your taxable value there. So that may cause some frustration as well this year. We kind of left that out earlier there, but I did want to point that out. So that's the homestead exemption. So again, a reduction in taxable value there up front on that reduces your overall tax liability, and then also the 10% homestead cap limitation. Now, if you're over 65, hey, this is where life really pays off for you here. That 65th birthday is really, really important. You want to go down to the appraisal district and tell them, hey, I'm 65 today, where's my birthday cake? And they're going to give you a form and you're going to fill it out. And it's going to be one of the best presents you ever had, is because what it's going to do is that over 65 exemption is going to lock in your tax liability, the dollar amount that you are paying on your taxes for that year going forward, okay? So it doesn't lock in the value and it doesn't lock in the tax rate, it locks in the dollar amount of which you pay on your school and the other entities that are eligible for freezing. So those are two great benefits there, homestead over 65. Also, if you're a disabled veteran, thank you for your service. That's number one, right? So really appreciate that. Freedom isn't free. However, the Disabled Veterans Exemption provides an exemption there to veterans based upon their eligibility, okay? And so if you're a veteran, if you have a disability there, qualifying disability there, make sure you report that to the appraisal district. It's worth quite a bit.
If you'd like more homeowner tips to be able to save you time, money, and energy, make sure you subscribe to this channel and also hit that bell notification. That way you're not missing out on any great information.